I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Most of us know the role of New York's mayor and how he runs the city. But how many of us understand the city's comptroller and what he does and how important that office is to the city's existence? I couldn't think of anyone better to explain this than the comptroller himself, Scott Stringer, and he's my guest today. I love it, the comptroller. I like that.
Not controller.
Not controller. But that's basically in public office that it's comptroller.
Right.
You still are the chief financial officer.
That's right.
And your responsibilities are not only finance but auditing.
You know, it's a very interesting job because there's a lot that goes into it. So you're absolutely right. We're the auditor-in-chief. So you monitor city agencies, you root out waste, corruption, you hold the mayoral agencies accountable. But while you're doing that, you're also the chief fiduciary of what is now a $160 billion pension fund. So you also protect the retirement security of 700,000 people, 350,000 people who are in the system now and are retirees. So that's two. The third thing you do is you also settle claims against the city. And part of that is becoming, I think, very public now with a lot of the innocent cases, with the whole issues related to policing and those challenges. So the office does many different things that most New Yorkers, I think, are just starting to realize as we get out there in my first term.
Most people won't remember Abe Beam, but I always think of the comptroller as being like Abe Beam, an accountant, you know, with a green shade or something like that. But you've taken it, I think, to new heights. I mean, you are really being quite creative in the role of it.
You know, the role has, I think, evolved over time.
Yeah.
And you know, if you think back to the fiscal crisis during the Beam administration in the 70s, and then looking at the role of other controllers like Jay Golden and Ed Koch during those years, I think right now the controller has a very challenging job for two reasons. And the first is the charter says you have to work very closely with the mayor. Bill de Blasio and I obviously share a lot of commonality, and we work together to market bonds and work on cities' financial issues all the time. But the charter is very clear that you also have to hold the mayor accountable. And that is something that we've been able to do, I think, very effectively.
Yeah, no, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt. No. It's like the checks and balances. I mean, you are really the check, aren't you?
You have to be.
Yeah.
And as much as we support pre-K, as much as we support the affordable housing plan, I've stood with the mayor. We're working to bring the pension fund in to help with the revolving loan fund for affordable housing. That's the work we have to do with the mayor. But we also have to hold agencies accountable. That's why we introduced ClaimStat, because we started to look at why the city was budgeting $674 million a year to settle claims against the city. And we were only seeing the cost of that rise, maybe next few years, close to $800 million. So we put together this protocol that I think can really make a difference, because what we're saying to city agencies is drill down and look at what's going on within your management. Find out how to change a policy or a protocol to reduce claims so people aren't suing the city over and over and over again. That's why we just zeroed in on the Department of Corrections, where we could correlate issues related to claims within the Rikers prison system and also the problems of inmate abuse at the same time.
And that's almost just scratching the surface, isn't it?
I think it is scratching the surface.
Do you think I think your political background has a definite advantage in being comptroller. You know, sometimes you find people from Wall Street saying, well, I'm going to be the comptroller. But when you were an assemblyman or borough president, when you heard a lot of complaints about something or a lot of, you know, comments about one thing, that drew your attention, right?
Well, that's true.
And that's ClaimStat in a way.
Well, that's true. And you know, part of being the chief financial officer is this job is actually not for only someone who comes from Wall Street. I would argue that you need someone to be a very strong manager. This office has a $58 million budget.
How many employees?
750 employees, 18 bureaus. And so you have to have some real management skill, and you also have to have the ability to bring the best and the brightest into this office. And Ronnie, you would appreciate how difficult it is to get excellent people to want to be in government. And our office has, I think, created a top-line group of managers, deputy controllers that have really taken this office to a new level. I'm not going to take credit for it, but you will be pleased to know, especially you, that of the 8 deputy controllers, 7 of the 8 are women. And everyone said to me, well, how are you going to attract women to this financial office? And I will tell you, it was very easy.
Well, you've always been very smart in your staffs.
Yeah.
You always had good staffs. And so you know the women are smart. So what are we going to do about that? Anyway, and your mother.
Right.
The ClaimStat So you've gone back to the Parks Department and said these trees. Now, when you did the trees, does that include Central Park and the other conservancies?
These actually were only street trees, so there's 650,000 street trees in the city.
But the city paid the claim, didn't it,
The city played the claim.
for the Central
Yes,
Park?
for Central Park.
Yeah. So how can you control that?
Well, the lesson is sometimes you have to look and say, maybe it's not a good idea to cut tree pruning in the budget, which is exactly what happened. Some council member in some budget meeting said, we could do without the tree pruning. But then we started to look at the claims against the city for trees that fell on people, hurt people seriously, and suddenly we started running up $14 million in tree pruning, $15 million in tree pruning. Well, why'd you cut the $1 million?
Yeah.
Perhaps there's that correlation. Same is true with the issues with police. 36% of claims against the city are filed because of a police issue. And so we started to look within ClaimStat and said, why are all these complaints coming from precincts in the South Bronx and Central Brooklyn? Well, because that's where a lot of these problems have occurred. So our message, whether it's to the police, the Department of Environmental Protection, or any other agency, is use this data to fix the problem so that we don't continue to have to pay out huge sums of money. And also, perhaps we'll also change policy that will help average New Yorkers.
Do you go directly to the agency, or do you have, yeah?
Well,
There's no restrictions on what a controller, your office does.
We can go. We are going to the agencies. We want this to be a useful tool. It's not just about saying gotcha to an agency. Part of people view a controller's audit as this is just a way to get in the newspaper. But we're actually taking a more proactive approach. We want to work with the mayor's office. We want to work with different agencies, because my job is to save money and also influence policy in a positive way.
I'm surprised potholes hasn't been a major cost.
Well,
Are you looking at that?
Stay tuned. We're going to be releasing ClaimStat of every agency. We did 5 in the beginning, and more are coming. So we did the Department of Transportation, Department of Sanitation, DEP, the like, and more will come.
So how does this make your relationship with the mayor?
We have a good relationship. We meet, we talk about the city budget. Part of my job is to critique the budget process going on, and I gave him an A for this budget. I thought that he was prudent in his spending. He didn't overspend, even though there was certainly a lot more money than we've ever had before. I think the teacher contract set the pace for the labor negotiations. I said in January, when the mayor released a preliminary budget, that it was incomplete because we didn't have money for the 152 labor contracts. So the mayor came back, put the labor contract front and center, and if you look at where we are in the out years, we estimate that the gaps are going to be very close. They're not going to be huge.
Very interesting.
So we do have a lot of money.
And as these new contracts get signed, it still falls within it.
Yes, so there's definitely going to be a bump around 2020, and that's going to be a challenge. But remember, we have 7 years to look at ways to save money. I did say the mayor needs a PEG program. We have to continue to look at efficiencies in government, even in good times. There's, as you know, the bureaucracy, wastes money. That's what ClaimStat will help. If we reduce claims 10, 15, 20%, that's more money for affordable housing, more money for daycare, more money for pre-K, and that's what we want to do.
So, when I was in the council and then later involved with not-for-profits, the mayor's contract office of contracts, is very important. How do you relate to them? I mean, they've signed off on these contracts, right?
Well, it's interesting. They give them to us. We sign off. In fact, the controller.
They negotiate the contract. They issue the RFP.
Right, and then they eventually that RFP, that contract, is registered with the controller's office. We register 30,000 contracts a year, so that's a lot of oversight. We have a good staff. Our deputy controller.
Speeding up the process.
Starting to. I mean, we're going to try to be more innovative, more technology. Believe it or not, a lot of these contracts are Xeroxed on big machines. There's very little technology, so we're going to grow that. Our deputy controller, Lisa Flores, comes from the mayor's office of contracts. She's extraordinary, breaking ground every day. And look, contracts matter because part of what we have to do, whether it's with pre-K or social service programs, we have to make sure that those contracts are being administrated by good operators, people who have pristine reputations. A lot of this is public, all of this is public money. So that's another challenge to the job that we're working on.
The pre-K project is going to be very difficult, isn't it?
Listen, I give the mayor great credit. He went to Albany, he got the money, and now this ambitious pre-K agenda, we're going to certainly work very closely with him to register the contracts. Obviously, we have a responsibility to make sure those contracts meet the standard of integrity and safety, but we're working with them, right now as we speak.
The whole daycare thing is so confusing and always has been to me because it's different agencies that have different roles in it. It's city, sponsored and it's private sponsored, it's individual. Same thing's going to happen, isn't it, with pre-K?
Listen, we're going to rely a lot on community-based organizations. It's going to be a huge field of entry, but I think we have to do it, and we have to do it now.
But in your auditing, you don't send out inspectors, do you?
We don't send out inspectors, but we are going to audit the pre-K sites, and we're going to audit the operators. And right now, as contracts come in for my signature, we are going through an investigative process within our office. We kick back contracts that we don't think make the standard. That's my job, and that's what we're going to continue to do. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we're working with the mayor to get this program started. Now, I have a 2.5-year-old and a 15-month-old, and I would argue that pre-K for fourth graders is critical. But this starts 0 to 3.
Yeah.
So the next part of this is how we can get every kid to have an opportunity to get the learning they're going to need.
So important.
It's critical to the whole city.
Let's go back to the pension. How much money do we have 5 different pension funds?
So
is that true?
Yes. So we're a little different than everybody else because we're in New York. So we have 5 different pension boards. So we have police, fire, teachers, the NICERS board. So a system called BERS. So we have 5 different pension funds that that the controller is the chief financial advisor to. And we're also a trustee of 4 of the 5 boards. So it's a little like herding cats. There are 58 trustees, and part of what I hope...
and all that money gets pooled?
Well, all that money is, at the end of the day, all that money becomes one. That's our $160 billion. The good news this year is we were able to realize a 17.4% return, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be there next year or the year after. It does mean that we do have to make some real reform within the pension system. Part of what I've tried to do, talking to the trustees, is try to better align the pension funds so we can make more timely investments, change the rules so we can take advantage of financial opportunities that sometimes get bogged down in the bureaucracy.
How do you actually make an investment?
Well, we have a chief investment officer and a Bureau of Asset Management, and they are the professionals that create an asset class, different asset classes and how we approach that. Sometimes you want to invest, we have affordable housing. Sometimes you want to invest in real estate. That doesn't always give you a greater return, but it's a very strong investment on the long term. Obviously, stocks and bonds did very well this year, and that's part of why our pension fund did well.
So it's your advisors, your staff that decides
the asset allocation
or what bonds to buy?
Yeah, we work with money managers. Now, we talk about reform and how we can make it more efficient. We're spending $450 million on these money managers from Wall Street, $450 million. So I want to align the pension funds, make them work better, and then the goal has to be that some of this investing should happen in-house. That would save us hundreds of millions of dollars. So we don't have to pay people money that city workers could easily do as we attract the best and the brightest. So I have a long-term goal for the pension fund, which will mean better aligning, but also bringing some of this work in-house, reduce those fees that we're paying to Wall Street.
And they don't even pay the taxes necessarily, do they?
Well, not always.
I mean, the kind of taxes we would like them to pay.
That's right. That's right.
And but you no longer have placement agents.
Well, we did. Before I came into office, believe it or not, New York City still had placement agents, and we're allowed to hire placement agents. Now, in all fairness, we were down to just a handful. And in my first month in office, we did a couple of things. The first is we said we're banning placement agents. There's no reason why you need a middleman to talk to our chief investment officer or the Bureau of Asset Management. This is a system that got a lot of people in trouble, and today we've now passed in all 5 boards a ban on placement agents. But second, as auditor-in-chief, we also can't talk about someone else's house unless our own house is together. And that's why we are now working to create more disclosure among our BAM staff, putting a risk management team in place so that we can safeguard the pension fund. This economy goes up and down. We need to have better protections within our own system to provide.
It's an enormous responsibility.
Enormous responsibility.
It's the children, though, that keep you up at night.
Well, when
Not
they're keeping
the investment.
Well, when the babies are keeping me up at night, that's something I worry about
You think about,
because it's a tremendous responsibility. People's retirement security are related to those pensions, and most people that pension and Social Security, people are barely making it in the city. People think everyone has big pensions. The average pension is so small, so I want to safeguard that for everybody.
Right. It's very. What I found fascinating is the wage. What do you call it? The wage setting that your office does.
That's right. Oh, the prevailing wage.
The prevailing wage. It's fascinating. Now, how does that happen? I mean, is that in statute that you have that responsibility?
It's funny when you talk about this job and you realize all the different aspects to it. No, we set the prevailing wage as well, and that's a whole calculation.
So you guys can just decide, well, this bricklayer, the bricklayers should really be getting more money than they're getting now?
Well, you don't just do it arbitrarily. You actually go through a calculus.
We should explain what it is.
Which is basically you set the prevailing wage for workers, outside workers
who have contracts with the city.
The city, so that they're getting paid a comparable wage or reasonable wage. And there's a calculation, and there are disputes. And look, I take the view that all these workers have to put food on the table for their families. They should have a living wage. My job is to give them that wage, but also be mindful that this is city money and that we have to have a certain calculation. So that's what we're working on.
Just fascinates me. If you go down the list, I mean, you're talking about operators of cranes, bricklayers, steel work, all those different classifications. So do we get also to child care providers? I guess we do if they're under contract to the city.
Well, to a certain extent, I mean, we certainly, I mean, there are some that...
The municipal hospital
workers?
Well,
there are some, there are certain categories. So some yes, some no. Obviously, a lot of wage increases are also handled by collective bargaining.
I was going to ask what the relationship was.
Well, it's certain classification of job titles and workers. It's not everybody. But what's interesting about this office is when you start breaking it down for people, you realize it interacts with everybody who is a New York City resident, whether you're a carpenter or someone with a pension or somebody who feels that a city agency isn't doing its job. The Comptroller's office is to be that point person.
What surprised you most about the office?
So, I certainly understood the pension responsibility, and I've always liked to do my audits and reports since I was an assemblyman. I think the claims against the city and the innocent cases, something you'd be very interested in, is that we have a real responsibility given the innocent cases coming out of Brooklyn. When early on I settled the David Ranta case with the city, which broke new ground for a controller. We were able to give this man who served 20 or 17 years in prison, we couldn't give his total life back. He came out of prison very sick, but we could negotiate what I thought was a reasonable expedited settlement so he can get on with his life. And that was very heavy for me. And then realized that we have these innocent cases that's coming to the law department. Central Park 5, we signed off on with, after the law department negotiated. So this was an aspect of the job that more people are hearing about. ClaimStat, claims against the police department, corrections, Department of Environmental Protection. So this is the aspect of the job that probably was getting the most attention, but was not something that we had thought out during the campaign.
It's, do you follow, you've got, I think, a very sophisticated website, don't you think?
I like it.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it.
I don't go on it that much.
But now you've extended it to show who the contracts are with under construction. Is it just under construction, public works?
Well, we're now going a little deeper. We're going to go look at subcontractors. Right. We just announced in cooperation with EDC that they're now coming online to what's called CHECKBOOK 2.0, which is a great, I think, opportunity for people to find out where the money is, who's spending the money, who's getting the money. All the things that reporters used to spend months and years tearing their hair out. How can I find the connection and the dealing and who's spending what? Right now, you can go to the Comptroller's website, and it's all there. And that's as much about technology as it is about us trying to make it a more transparent city.
And you're working hard with the minority women business owners.
Well, we for the first time hired a chief diversity officer. This is incredible. New York City spent $16 billion on goods, services, law firms, accounting firms, paper, pencils. 2.7% of that money goes to women and minority-owned businesses. Now, we're certifying more MWBEs, but no one's getting contracts. So Carl Wallace, who's our Chief Diversity Officer, tremendous record. Wendy Garcia is the deputy. We've now built this office within the Comptroller's sphere where we're going to be looking and holding agencies accountable based on your procurement dollars. What's your plan to include more MWBs? What's your record been? And we're going to evaluate each of those agencies, including the Comptroller's Office.
Why do you think that they qualify but they don't get the contracts?
Because I think it's a stacked
just
deck.
the old
Because I think
system?
we spend so much time getting people qualified, we haven't created the public and private partnerships to actually create an opportunity for people to grow a company. And this is crucial when we talk about, income disparity. If these MWBEs can get going and we can move that 2% to 25%, think about all the communities that have been shut out economically. Now they have an opportunity to grow businesses and do their own
hire
hiring.
more people, yeah.
It's a no-brainer, but this city has been outrageously incompetent and slow in this time, in this era.
Yeah.
And so we're attacking this head on. The other thing we're doing, which I think speaks to the economy, is we've got to work with our big, large corporations, big and small, not just about sick time, but also understanding the workforce is changing. You've got a lot of single women with kids, single parents with kids, who need to have some flex time in their schedule to take care of their elders and their children. So we want very much to have a right to request legislation that we're spearheading, that I'm spearheading.
Yeah.
It's just 1 hour working with a corporation can change a family.
Yeah, it is, the personal attention that's given to it. So that would make, that's the story of Starbucks, where they have to regularize, whatever you call it, the schedule that somebody has, right?
Right.
And take into account the needs.
So this is a whole new way of, we're doing, I'm sponsoring a conference, which I'd love for you to come if you have time, on September 30th, to just start hashing out all the ways we can not work against business, but actually work with business. One of the great things about our right to request legislation that we've working on the state and the city councils, some of these big companies, they're on it.
Yeah.
Aetna's on it.
Yeah,
Like
and we
some of these
don't know
insur-
it, and they don't
And
realize that they're doing something.
And they love it because
Yeah.
it's saving them money,
Yeah.
and they're getting a stronger workforce.
Yeah. With your economic development, what's it called these days? The economic development department? What's the agency called? Corporation.
Oh yeah, yes, EDC, yes.
Can we find out, do you do work on what the tax exemptions or tax abatements that they get?
Well, probably not as well as you did it when
Incentives.
you were in the city council.
But that's a problem that
Well,
just,
we are part of getting EDC online and starting to look at some of these tax policies. I remember when I was borough president, we actually did a report along the lines of what you were working on in the council, which showed that we were subsidizing north of 125th Street, believe it or not, KFC, McDonald's, and Dunkin' Donuts, actually giving them subsidies to locate uptown to sell this junk food that was doing nothing but harming our children, where we should have been subsidizing through the IDC, should have been, healthier food options. And so I think you can expect from our office to look at, do those subsidies work? Do they matter? Look, in some cases it's very important, but in other cases it's a throwaway to a corporation that doesn't really want to stay in New York anyway. And so that has been the long-ranging debate. I do think that the mayor's affordable housing plan will also play a role in how we build out a lot of these communities. Who gets to live where, and can we really build an affordable housing structure that's going to work in the city? If we don't, we're going to have a city for very, very wealthy people.
and what are you doing also about job training? I mean, my whole thing is retrofitting old buildings, the whole energy field. Why aren't we, that's where we should be training and jobs.
It's the whole.
What are we going to do?
Listen, part of what we've got to do is it's retrofitting, but it's also the kids in our boroughs, in our communities, have an opportunity to be part of this high-tech economy.
Exactly.
And they're not.
Yeah.
And here's what's amazing. You talk to these entrepreneurs, and they have to look beyond the city for coders and programmers. Now, it doesn't take a lot of training to earn a $60,000 entry-level job, but we're bypassing our children because we're not we spend so much time teaching to the test. We're not teaching to the job that leads to a career. It's madness that our kids are not front and center for all of the technology that's happening in the city. We've passed we've passed Boston, we're rivaling Silicon Valley, and here's what we have that they don't have. They can they can certainly do their thing. I'm not begrudging the work they do, but our kids are the creative class. Our kids are the ones who make the apps, the music, the media, the culture, the diversity of New York City. Every child should be learning this in our public schools, but there are no science teachers. And until we did our report on arts education, many of our poorest communities don't have art teachers, and this is all related to the high-tech economy. We've got to get this right because that's the future for our children.
So, but now I'm back to my other thing. When you're investing money into housing, can we get the job training into the housing? I mean, are you going to do any audits of these job training centers, whatever
Yes.
they're called?
Yes. And this is not only, when you think about job training, it's not just kids, you also think about people,
It's adults.
middle-aged and
It's a
seniors.
lot of people.
Who have to work.
Absolutely.
Because their retirement is
Right,
not.
but everybody talks about, what we're going to do about job training and job. We've been talking about it for years.
Yes. Well,
and
here-
we're not very productive.
But here's why I think it matters now. This high-tech economy is really here
Mm-hmm.
now. So before you could argue that it would be nice to do it, now you have to do it. Or people
But I
aren't
want to
gonna do it.
add green to it also.
So you have me out here. So what else do you need? So you need green?
No,
No, that's true.
yeah.
It's
yeah.
true. I mean,
What?
and by the way, most people want to live in. Why do people want to live in New York? It's a big, safe city. It's culturally diverse, and also, you want to live in a neighborhood where you're going to live longer because the air you breathe is better, and there's park space and open space.
Do you
The
think-
city's got to do more on the skyline, and I would hope that the mayor gets to understand that we really do have to think about how we build the city and what it looks like.
That worries me. The relying on the percentage of units to provide, affordable housing. It's good in some places, and it can have disastrous results, I think, in other places.
I think you also have to think about not just where and how you build affordable housing, which I'm passionate
Yeah.
about, and you are too,
Yeah.
but you also have to build out a whole community because there are component pieces to
Right.
it. If you expand infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, you'll build in communities you never thought you'd ever go to.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing now in places like Brooklyn. The transportation system got better. People feel safer on the subways. So now you have a real opportunity to travel the whole city. And I think the Bronx is the next candidate for real opportunity economically.
So what do we leave this program with about the Comptroller's office?
I think the difference for me is, as borough president, I spent a lot of time thinking how to make the borough president's office relevant because the charter was very narrow in what you could do. And Comptroller is obviously has much more heft in terms of the charter and the work that we do as we described. I just want to do a good job for the people doing it. So I hope to be able to come on the show and from time to time and give you an update.
Well, I think you're doing very well, and if people want to follow it, they just go to.
Just go to controllernyc.gov.
Thank you very much,
It's
Scott
great to be
Stringer.
on this show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.